Way to go, Putin. Can you believe in the modern era we have a guy who just invaded and started shelling civilians? Mind-boggling. Ay, 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 ay. Okay, let's get on with this Q&A. But before we do, a couple of things I want to cover. As you can see, I am not in my primary location. I am in my, this is the universal sign for secondary location. My wife's sprawl has emerged. It slipped under the door of her studio and is now spreading across the floor of our living room slash dining room slash kitchen. And you do not want to see it. I don't want to see it. And yes, it's 6 degrees outside, and I do have the heat on in my office, but I wore my jackets just to infuriate the people that wonder why I wear jackets inside. I now have a bird book. I'm tracking all the birds that I'm seeing. Yes, I've gone down that rabbit hole. I apologize. I've got letters that are about to head out. I've got a new backpack that the EDC crowd would go insane over. And oh, by the way, if you don't know the EDC thing, Everyday Carry Community, talk about going down a rabbit hole that is so unhealthy, and it's the most bizarre, peculiar environment I think I've seen in a long time. I'm fascinated and horrified by the EDC crowd. And EDC, if you don't know, is Everyday Carry. And these are primarily white men with a lot of time and income who obsess over the things that they're going to carry on a daily basis, right? We all carry stuff on a daily basis, but they've turned this into a community where there's kind of a right and wrong between what you carry, how you carry it, how you display it. And it's really bizarre. So it started, I think, with flashlight, pocket knife, cell phone, wallet, and now it is kind of creepily expanded into the firearm world. And so it's bizarre to see some young guy who lives in like Irvine, and he's like, this is the 45 that I carry every day, and here's the 380 ankle gun that I carry every day, and these are the 7 pocket knives that I carry every day. And I'm like, what, are you in Ukraine? Are you on your way to Ukraine? Why are you carrying sidearms around Irvine, California? It's not like those streets are gritty, right? I've ridden those streets on my bicycle. You might get hit by someone pushing a stroller, but I don't think you're going to find yourself pinned down in a firefight anytime soon. If you haven't seen the EDC crowd, it is worth investigating because it is truly bizarre. I digress. For those of you out there who are wondering why I do so many question and answer films, it's because this is what I have time for. I can shoot these quickly for me, edit them quickly, and upload them. This YouTube channel is not remotely close to my easy now printer. It's not remotely close to my main gig. This is a sideshow. This is maybe 10% of what I do on a daily basis is YouTube, and that's probably a stretch. It's probably closer to 5%. So I think a lot of people think that I am a quote YouTuber and I'm sitting around like scripting and drawing and grafting. I just finished the 2nd episode of Baja Begins. And I was telling a friend last night about how I made the film. And I said to myself, there's probably no one out there who's making films like this because it's so disjointed and so fast and so first take. I don't have a script. I basically have a folder that has 360 GoPro motion, stills, and audio. And I open one folder at a time. I randomly pull content. And then I have my journal laid out in front of me. And I have my Fisher Space Pen, by the way, which is another thing that the EDC crowd would go insane over. And I say to myself, I got to write something about San Carlos. And I just sit there and whatever comes into my head, I write down. And then I go, okay, I got to write something about Cabo. I write something about Cabo. Oh, I need to do something that's like the final audio piece for this. I write it and it's one take. I throw it in, I export it, and I move on. So I'm not like a professional filmmaker by any stretch. I'm not a professional YouTuber by any stretch. I probably never will be. The Q&A films are easy. The list of things I have to do today and the phone calls I have to do for work, I'll probably be on the phone from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. today. And then I've got a bunch of logistical stuff to get through for Blurb prior to that. And so YouTube sort of takes its place. That's why I do so many Q&A films. Alrighty then, let's get on to the Q&A. We are at 4.53 seconds into this. By the way, I ran into someone last night, a friend, who said to me, hey, a mutual friend of ours is in the Ukraine right now. And this is a person who spends their lives in war zones and conflict zones. And I was a little bit worried. And then I thought, well, he's made it this long and he's very intelligent about how he works and what he's doing. But this other person said to me, oh, do you know he's in the Ukraine? And I said, no. And they said, oh, well, you got to go to his Instagram feed. So I did this morning. I tried. That is just the worst interface for photography I have ever seen, Instagram. To take a story of the magnitude and importance of the Ukraine and the Russian invasion and make me look at this, first of all, on my mobile phone, and not even have the ability really to go to my computer and really get involved here and not just one image at a time, but to see the actual story of what's transpiring. Instagram has to be the worst possible thing I've ever seen. It literally felt demeaning to me. It felt demeaning to the people that are suffering right now today in the Ukraine to have that being the interface for the journalists who are operating there. And I know it's not the only interface, but it sure as hell gets a lot of direction and push towards it. There has to be a better way. I don't want to see that scenario played out on Instagram. It's horrible. And by the way, if that is your only experience with photography, is shooting and posting on Instagram, just do one thing. I know that you're probably physically addicted to that platform, which I was for a while, and I'm sure a lot of millions of other people are as well. Delete it for 1 month. And instead of going on Instagram, take the images that you're doing and make one print a day. Just print one image over a 30-day period and take each image and toss it in a pile and just let them accumulate. And at the end of 30 days, go back and lay those out on a table and see what you have. Your life will change immediately. And the pull, by 30 days in, you will have physically detoxed off of Instagram, at least for the time being. My guess is you will never go back. See, I gave you free advice that you didn't ask for before I even got to the Q&A. I mean, how this channel is it's the channel that keeps on giving. Now, I have way too many questions to get to. Thank you to everybody who sent a question in, and I'm one person with one opinion, just keep that in mind. I'm probably gonna have to do two, because these are really good questions and there's a ton of them. And if you don't like Q&As, sorry, skip it, go to the next one. Go out and make pictures, go roll in the snow. We got probably 3 inches last night. Question number 1, do you feel pressure to post on YouTube? I mentioned this in the very beginning of my Baja Begins episode 2 film, and I was doing an interview with someone a couple weeks ago, or maybe even just a week or so ago, someone I really like, very friendly person, and said something or asked me a question that I thought was peculiar but also expected. He said, don't you feel pressure to post on YouTube? And I said, absolutely not. In fact, you give me a little window away from my normal daily routine of being online, and I can come dangerously close to never coming back to any of this. And that is a very truthful statement where I kind of, even after a week in Baja, my brain had sort of erased the idea that I had a YouTube channel. So not only do I not feel pressure, and I don't ever feel pressure to post on my Shifter Media site either. I do it because I love doing it, and the YouTube thing started as a work thing, and now it's something I like to do, and I do it when I feel like doing it. If you feel pressure to post on any form of social media or any form of online content, you are doomed. You are doomed to crack and fail. My guess is that is 100% of us fall into that category. If you feel pressure to post, which is in essence saying you feel pressure to build following, you will fail 100%. And the reason I say that is the best people in the world at doing this fail across the board. Some of them take 6 months, some of them take 5 years, some of them take 10 years. They crack and fail. Because in essence, if you're doing that, it typically means that you're posting under a facade of who you actually are. Because to build following means that you have to fabricate a version of yourself that is palatable to as many people as possible. And let's face it, most of us, including myself, and you could put me at the top of this list, I am a flawed human being. I can't put the actual me online because if I did, I would probably either get in trouble, there would be, SWAT over the top of my house, or you people would be like, man, he is out there, and you would bail. So these people, and I say this after watching another YouTuber who I think I've never met this person, seems like a very, very nice person who's had a long run on YouTube. But I knew, even from the first time I saw him on YouTube, I knew that what I was getting on YouTube was not the real him. There were little vignettes, little cracks, little windows into who he was over the years through his films. And in my head, I'm like, dude, you're dead man walking. You can run, but you can't hide. And at some point, the real you is going to bubble to the top, and there's going to be a major problem. And sure enough, it happened about a month ago. He made a film and said, I got to apologize, and I'm not going to be posting for a while, and I've got some mental health issues and blah, blah, blah. That's what happens to all of us. If we fake it, and this whole thing about fake it till you make it is gross. That's not cool. Just, if you can't be you, then what's the point of doing it? So I put online, my identity online is parts of who I am. And the parts that I'm not sharing are things that I don't think you'd really be interested in anyway. But I don't care if you follow me or not. This is not something that's hovering over me, creating pressure saying, oh, I've got to post 3 times a week. Oh, I've got to answer all the comments. Oh, I've got to do all these things. That is a short-term solution that is going to end up with you in a miserable place. So just chill, man. Just back it up. Just slow it down. Boop, 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 beep, beep, beep. Back the thing up and start over and say, be truthful, be honest, try to be funny, and then deliver the content that you want, and you won't feel the pressure, and everything will be fine. In the words of C. Thomas Howell, all that hate's gonna burn you up, kid. Okay, question number 2. What motion settings, I feel like I'm on a game show, which I like. What motion settings do you use on your Fuji cameras? So as of right now, depends on what I'm shooting. I typically use 2 different settings. I'm either shooting in 1080, and I don't really care about anything else. It's just quick run and gun stuff. Or I'm shooting 4K 24p and F-Log. That's what I'm doing. And then, sometimes like Fuji has a cinema setting, which I think is actually pretty good, but I'm doing the color work in software, in the post. So the F-Log is fine. F-Log is like a raw file in a still image, where you're going to do all of the work on it afterwards. And by the way, when I shoot stills, 100% of the time I shoot raw files. I never shoot JPEGs. I never even shoot raw and JPEG. I just shoot raw files. I've been doing that since 1997, basically-ish. Whenever the raw file type came in is when I started using it. It's a digital negative. It's untouchable. It's unruinable. And so it makes sense. And it's just the system that I'm used to. I know a lot of people don't want to do conversions. They don't want to store raw files. Well, guess what? If you ever doing professional assignments, you better get used to shooting raw, because clients, if you try to send them a JPEG, certain clients, depending on what the JPEG is being used for, but if you're going to do a commercial shoot, you're not shooting JPEGs. No, client's going to laugh you out of the room. Raw. It's not that hard. If I can do it, the digital Luddite, if I can do it, you surely can too. But those are my settings. Question number 3. Oh, I love this question. I don't have a blog or online presence at all. All right, I like that. I print for myself only. I think that's smart. Do you honestly recommend creating a website or blog with the view to potentially show work further down the line? Yes, I do. If you're going to show work online, how else are you going to do it? Instagram? Please. Instagram, for those of you who don't know, it cracked. It cracked. It peaked, and we're on the downward slope. Believe it or not, if every single indicator I see tells me that's the reality. So take social media out of the equation. If you said to me, I'm a photographer and here's my work, go to Facebook, I'm deleting your email and I'm blocking you as an emailer. I'm not looking at your work on Facebook, and I'm not looking at your work on Instagram. It's demeaning. How else are you going to do it? And here's the thing about a website. If you view a website as work, don't do it. Don't do it, and you probably have no shot at being a photographer. Because if you consider that work, creating a site for yourself to showcase you as a human being, your story, the work, the context, if you view that as work, you're never going to make it as a photographer. Not even remotely close. Because that is going to be the icing on the cake. That's the best part of your day. Being a photographer, bidding on jobs, licensing images, doing follow-up with clients that don't pay, that stuff sucks. It really sucks. Having a site where you're like, look, I just worked on the border for 4 days. here's a 5-image picture package and some copy that I wrote about that. And oh, by the way, here it is beautifully displayed online. That to me is interesting. That's the best part of your day. So I absolutely think that a website, why am I refreshing my Shifter site as we speak? I'm doing it as a model for those of you who are on the fence about this, as a model to show you this is one way that you could do this. You could show the work in this way. You could have this kind of content. You could use Discord. You could use Patreon. I'm doing it as a roadmap. And you can pick and choose what I'm doing and say, I don't want Discord, I don't want Patreon, but I want that, and I want a database, and I want an email newsletter, and I want posts that look like that. Absolutely. That's a really good question. I'm glad you asked it. And I've been asked this question over and over again because I think there's a reluctance for people to believe this is a path. And I think that's the power of the social networks and the big tech companies that have just overwhelmed people into thinking there is no other way. We're creatives. We're supposed to be creative. We can make our own way. And in fact, society is counting on us to make our own way because we are the ones that are supposed to be leading. So try it out. And by the way, everybody's doing it. If I want to look at what Jimmy Chin is doing, do I go to Instagram? No, never. I don't want to know him on Instagram. He's too big, right? There's too much there, whether it's climbing or skiing or traveling or the filmmaking or the photography or the producing or whatever else he's doing. I don't want to know him on Instagram. I want to go to jimmychin.com. Even if it hasn't been updated in 6 months, I don't care because what's on there was methodically thought out as to how it's placed in the system, where it fits, what the context is, and it's the best of the best. Let's face it, whose Instagram feed? I can think of one person whose Instagram feed has no fat whatsoever. It is a razor sharp, honed delivery mechanism. Everybody else, not so much. 4, when making pictures, are you thinking of the sequencing or edit this early, or do you let yourself shoot and think about it later? Another good question. I might have answered this one in a past Q&A. So here is the truth of this. It's a really good question, especially for anyone who's done documentary work for any period of time where you're in the field day after day after day, week after week, month after month, and you're working on something, and in your head, you're piecing things together as you go. There's an upside and a downside to starting to lay things out in your head as you're still in the field. I think it's limiting in some ways. It's very challenging because making great photographs should take probably 100% of your bandwidth. So when you, in the back of your head, suddenly slip in a layer of, I just made this photograph and now how's that gonna end up on the page? Is there room for type? Is that gonna be, where does it fit in the sequence? Now you're not thinking about the photography in front of you. So my recommendation is not to do that unless you are specifically going into the field with that as part of the experience. And let me explain. So I'm teaching a class in Albania in May, 2 classes actually. And it's about photography class, but it's also about making what I call real-time magazine publishing, which is shoot during the day, then edit and sequence and design at night so that every day you make progress on a publication. And by the time you leave the country, you've already uploaded it. And by the time you get home, you wait a few days and your publication shows up. In this case, we're going to be designing magazines. That is a very specific exercise, and it's very fun to do, but I wouldn't say it's the best way to make the best possible still images because, again, you're doing more than one thing at one time. And I think that is very tricky for anyone to do, including myself. But I do like doing that. I did not do it in Baja, didn't have time. But in Albania, I will, and it's kind of a fun exercise. And I did this already in 2019 in Albania, which is why I'm going back to now teach that same technique. So most of the time, don't do it unless you're going to specifically do it to try it as a new exercise. 5. What has changed or improved with your videos since the Shifter How to Do Long-Term Projects Part 1? That episode seems significant in the evolution of your channel, but perhaps you have a different pivot point in mind. That first film rant might have been a spark too. So I remember, I think the first project film that I did from the van in Arizona. I think that was the one. So the pivot point that the documentary projects films proved to me was that there was an audience for that kind of information. And I remember being absolutely mind-boggled when people wrote me and said, hey, this project stuff that you're talking about, no one on YouTube is talking about that. And I was like, wait a minute, it's not like YouTube was developed last year. I was like, that can't be right. It's just that maybe people aren't looking in the right place. But the more investigation I did about YouTube as a source for photography information, I realized that person was right. For every Alex Soth on YouTube, there are thousands of people with no training, no experience, who are either reviewing gear or they're doing photography channels, but have no contact with the actual industry of photography. And in fact, probably a lot of them don't know that that exists, or they don't care that it exists, because if you're only gonna live in the online space, you don't really need that part of the business. So once people started reaching out and asking about really basic photo 101 education, I was like, wow, maybe there is something I have rattling around in this melon that could be of value to people besides myself. And so that's what really prompted me to actually keep doing the YouTube thing, was to say, well, okay, I've got information that maybe people want that's in short supply. And I think that is still true today, because I saw this thing on YouTube a couple of days ago. What shows up in your feed is mortifying. There is some evil person sitting in a control room somewhere, literally like the old phone connectors, and they're like punching in things here and punching in, oh, this guy, he needs that film, and this person. It's all done by hand, I guarantee you. Everyone thinks it's all technology. It's not. There's some guy in a room with a circuit board. He's controlling all of YouTube. And that guy's like, I'm gonna put these really whacked out YouTube film people in his feed. And they did. And I saw this film and I was like, you gotta be kidding me. And then someone else actually emailed me a link to the same film and said, and this is a real photographer who sent it, and said, can you believe what this guy is saying? And I wrote back and said, look, if your audience doesn't know, then you can say anything you want and get away with it. It's obvious. And these people are really successful YouTubers, more power to them. If they're happy, it's not like they're hurting anybody. It's just a weird take on things. But that's what that film did. Number 6, can you give some advice on your favorite way to use and label and archive your slides? What did you write on each slide? Writings on the front, pencil, pen, dates, locations. No, I don't write on my slides at all. Some of the slides that I have in my archive are plastic mounts, depending on the lab you used and the kind of film you used, and then some are paper mounts. Kodachrome notoriously came in paper mounts, and I love paper slide mounts. I don't love the plastic so much, but that was pretty common at the time as well. I don't ever write on the slide, because even if you're using an archival pen of some sort, I still don't think there's a reason to write on the slide. And a pencil is made out of graphite, and if that graphite flakes out and flakes off and ends up on the actual image itself, that doesn't seem like a smart thing either. I don't think you need to. What you need is an archival slide page, and you need to write at the top of the archival slide page what that work is. And then that goes into an archival binder or box. And then again, that assignment, that project, that story is labeled on the outside. It's a very simple protocol. It's a simple system. And I guess if I had to write, I would probably use a ballpoint, just because it wouldn't, it's going to imprint that paper mount, but at least it's probably not going to run. I would definitely not use a fountain pen. Pencil, again, I don't want graphite flakes getting into the image. Just use an archival page, a slide page, and an archival box and storage solution, and I think you're going to be okay. And again, when you're shooting film, typically you're not amassing the quantity of images that you are when you're using a digital camera. And so it's pretty easy to archive. Film archives incredibly well. You have institutions in America who were all digital, who were, on that digital high and saying this is amazing. And then all of a sudden they started to lose material. Gold CDs, maybe they weren't archival. The player that was able to read those CDs, the person who made, or the company that made the player goes out of business. Now your CDs are unusable. This has happened again and again and again and again. You have some of the major archiving houses in America that went back to archiving on film. They also realized they could not fire anyone who knew how to use the digital equipment that we had over the last 20 or 30 years. Someone would get older, they would retire, the machinery would break, or something would go wrong, and all of a sudden the new staff members had come in, much younger. They're like, I don't know how that machine works. And institutions were like, wow, we can't let people go. We can't get rid of these people. I've heard these stories again and again and again from people who are professional archivists who work at these institutions, and it's terrifying. One of them said to me, quote, "We're in the beginning of a 30-year period where we will have nothing left." That sounds kind of negative to me. I don't know about you. That's my simple system. This thing, filled with slides. All of those cabinets back there, 4 more, they're all filled with slides, negs, all filed and archived in that same way. Number 7. And then I think I'll do 8 and then move on. 7, what does your year look like photographically? And what is the best case versus worst case scenario? Thank you for asking. There's a lot of mystery around my photography. Okay, not a lot. That would be arrogant for me to say. I don't think there's a whole lot of people on the planet wondering what I'm going to do photographically. There's a handful of people. That's it. And none of them are in my family. I've never had a conversation about photography with my family. And this is what, 30 years in? Yeah. Well, I take that back. My dad told me photography was a hobby, that I should be an investment banker. That was way back in the day. It's probably 86, 87. And then my dad would make disparaging comments about me and photographers. So I guess, does that technically mean it was a conversation if I responded? I think it does. Anyway, so I was wrong about that. What does it look like photographically? It looks like a fire drill. Basically, it is a fire drill when I do photography. I don't envision having the time to do a project where that's the only thing I'm doing. Plus, Blurb is my priority. Blurb is my full-time job and has been for 12 years. I love it. It's a job that would, if you knew what I had to do for the job, it would probably confuse a lot of you, because I think most of what I'm doing is things that you will not see. And it's a lot of stuff that's just not, it's documents and meetings and calls and planning and all this kind of stuff. I love it. That's the priority. It does not involve photography. Then there's the side of the Blurb job that does involve filmmaking, photography, that kind of thing. And that's a little bit. And I'm hoping that that grows in percentage and stature, because that's what I want to be doing. And then ideally, best case scenario would be 3 times a year, I work on a long-term project that I then, instead of just shooting those images in the field, I would now be shooting those images in the field, but also documenting the experience of being in the field, as well as documenting how that project story idea came to be, how I did the research, how I did the principal photography, and then the editing, sequencing, designing, and publication of the work. And then depending on the book and the project and the work, whether or not I was going to try to sell that or make it publicly available, then how to market and distribute that. I would love to do that 3 times a year. That is never going to happen. I mean, that ideally, I could ask for that till I'm blue in the face. Doing long-term projects and tracking what I just mentioned, it's bizarre. If you don't do that kind of work and you don't make publications and you don't try to sell those publications, you would have no idea probably how to do it and how complicated it actually is. And so convincing people that that's what I should be doing and tracking, that's a hard sell. Most of the time people are not going to want to invest that kind of time and energy and focus on something long. They're looking for a soundbite, 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 soundbite. So I have to balance what I'm doing, providing soundbites and providing conversation. Most of the time now, the conversation comes from my private side, the shifter side of my life, not the Blurb side. So I have to go back and forth and toggle these. AG23 is a community that is what I would say it's on hold for the moment, but that's actually not a bad thing. There's a few things I have to determine about who's going to be involved in AG23 from here on out, which we're working on right now. But my goal with that is to build out the online community, build the community of AG online, and also start running features online that aren't in the printed zine until Blurb. There's all kinds of stuff happening at Blurb that I can't share. And I'm looking at the roadmap and saying to myself, man, this could be the best thing in the world for AG, so I want to wait right now before I do any more print runs, and I'm going to focus on the digital side. And that would be the ideal. Worst case would just be sound bites all the time and straggling out YouTube films like I'm doing now without making anything that I think is really definitive or signature. That would be annoying, but again, not the end of the world. I have nothing to complain about. I don't live in the Ukraine. I'm not getting shelled right now by some crazy guy. So I have nothing to complain about. I try to keep all of this in perspective and have fun with it and realize that I'm not changing the world with what I'm doing. I am assisting a lot of people in their publishing journey, if you will, and that word's very much overused these days, but that's a really fun thing for me. Me making a book, is it fun? Yes. Does it give me a spike like it used to? Probably not. Watching someone else get that spike is really cool. That fires me up. Okay, question number 8, and then we're done with this one. Do you have any resources that demystify photography and photojournalism? What do you think about education? What schools? ICP, Speos, Parsons. I've been accepted at ICP and I'm considering going. Agencies. Okay. Do you have any resources that demystify photography and photojournalism? Get off of YouTube. Number one, I don't think there's much on YouTube. Alex Soth would be someone to watch, right? That's a Magnum photographer. I've not been to his channel yet. That's my fault. he's good. I'm sure his YouTube channel is providing actual, legitimate, relevant information. But if you're going to demystify photojournalism in particular, you're going to want to look at things like the websites of agencies like VU out of France. You've got Noor out of the Netherlands, and that's Noor. You've got Magnum. You've got 7, Roman numeral 7. They're based here in the US. One of their photographers is a friend, and he's in the Ukraine right now. Their agency offers education. They offer seminars, platforms, webinars, and they, by the way, have members who are teaching at ICP. So my guess is that you will be involved with some of the 7 members if you take the class at ICP. Art schools and schools like ICP, Parsons, Art Center, they are fantastic. They tend to be pricey. I don't know what the prices are with schools like that these days. I went to a 4-year college in America that had a journalism program. That is still a relevant thing as well. And also community colleges. You can also take a vast majority of workshops. You can go to the Santa Fe workshops. You can go to Main Media. 7 offers workshops. That's another great way to get in. And so what you're looking for is real instructors. There are plenty of photographers who have jumped on the workshop bandwagon because they're struggling in their commercial side of their business. And one of the ways that people compensate is to teach. And some of these people are really good and some of these people are not. And they're not prepared and they're somewhat egotistical. And the idea is, hey, I'm very cool and successful and you get to hang out with me for a week. My advice is to not take those workshops. My advice is to take the workshops from people who are legitimately prepared, who are legitimately caring about you as a person and a photographer and looking at you not as a competition or as an amateur, but as someone who might actually be a colleague and part of the industry at some point. And why would I not want my colleagues to be as best prepared as they possibly could be? So if we are in the field together at some point, I know that I can look at this person and know that I'm looking at someone who's prepared and intelligent and on the up and up and someone that I can trust. That'd be a good thing. I've never covered a war zone, but if I was in Ukraine right now and I was working by myself, I'd be terrified. And 2, if I was working there, I would probably really want to have a colleague right next to me or somewhere in the proximity. And that colleague I would want that to be someone that I trust, someone that I look at. Now, I don't have all the details of this story exactly right, but the gist is there. I have 2 other friends in photography, photojournalists. They were covering a very important news story in the 1990s. And one of them was hiding behind a wall. And when he stood up, unbeknownst to him, in the house that was next to the wall was a soldier with an AK-47 who was in the process of firing. And fired and hit my friend point blank in the side of the head with an AK-47 round. And because of the angle, just by sheer luck, it ricocheted, it deflected off of his head and didn't penetrate. But as you would imagine, he goes downed, right? Boom! And apparently there were other photographers that were like instinctively shooting, photographing this whole thing, right? Even though it's a colleague, it's another photographer, a non-combatant, your brain kicks in and you're like, when in those situations, and again, I've never been in a conflict situation, but I've been in plenty of situations where you're like terrified and your brain is like, shoot, 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 shoot. But one photographer put his cameras down and started helping and dragging him away. And they're buds. And I know both of the photographers, and I don't want to name either one of them because if the guy who got shot doesn't want to be known as the guy who got shot, then I don't want to out him. But that was a endearing bond that put those 2 people together forever because he stopped shooting and helped him. You know, that's the kind of thing you want. And when you're, around, photojournalism would be a very hard industry in my opinion today, but not to say you shouldn't do it and shouldn't try it. And God forbid, man, do we need good journalism more today than ever before. So good luck with that. All right, 35 minutes. That's it for this wrap. I'm using all the cool words that the kids use now. One person, one opinion. Thanks for the questions. And I'm going to come right back in 2 seconds and do another one of these.